My left here is Mike Meo. He's a Pacific Green candidate for Earl Blumenauer's 3rd District seat in the House. Michael? 50-50.
Well, actually, I'm the last speaker, and if I go over and if I'm still talking and if you're still interested, I'll keep talking. First I'd like to pay tribute to the fact that we are meeting in the Quaker Meeting House, the American Friends Multnomah County Meeting House. I'd like to recall for you all that the Democrats and the Whigs used to be hung up over an issue that nobody seemed to be wanting to take a stand over, namely that of human chattel. And that the American Friends were the breeding ground of the abolitionist movement. Perhaps some of the abolitionists went too far for the Quakers of the era, but they were the basic population group that gave birth to the idea, since, after all, the Quaker state of Pennsylvania was the first to abolish slavery in the late 17th century. And having then paid some homage to the fact that we are meeting here in a Quaker venue, an architectural monument to that Christian movement, I'd like to take a page from that of Barry Goldwater, the conservative Republican 1964 presidential candidate, who went round the country flinging his disagreement in the teeth of the people who he was trying to be elected from. And by doing so, I think Barry Goldwater laid the basis for subsequent conservative victory at the polls, because he established that a conservative was someone of integrity. So let me say then, my discussion is going to focus primarily before this audience on the question of 9/11. And I'm going to tell you to your face that investigation of the anomalies which are present in this traumatic experience of this country, further investigation is going to bring out more information. Further investigation will give you more detail of how it happened, but why it happened. What exactly was the intention of the actors in question, you're not going to get. You will be left with forever, ever, and a day, more than I'm going to live, more than you're going to live, with the necessity of having to interpret the historical data that comes out of your investigation. And that interpretation will always be a contested one. You will not be able to have, after any number of investigations, the truth. And I'm going to review with you some things that I think will be a Green Party way of looking at it. What is the Green Party in one nutshell? Think globally, act locally. That is what the Green Party is about. And we're going to take that very valuable, very compact saying, and we're going to look globally at a traumatic crime that was committed, 8 years ago, 7 years ago? And how could we look then at some historical conspiracies? Successful conspiracies, I don't know, unsuccessful conspiracies, but let's be completely global. Julius Caesar was killed in the Forum on the 15th of March, 44 BC. And he was the people's candidate. He was the popular party's elector. He was not in favor of the Senate's power. He was going up against the Senate. He was going to have the poor people do well. Well, on the other hand, basically, from everyone's point of view, then and since, he was grasping for sole political control of the whole ball of wax. How is that the people's candidate? Well, maybe, you look at it, maybe that's going to help the little guy. If we set up a dictatorship and we rule forever, the little guy will get better protected than those nasty rule-bound senatorial guys with all their rules and all their restrictions and so on. how about the guy who killed him? Well, later on, you know, in Dante Alighieri's poem, The Inferno, Satan is in a big, upside down, Satan is put upside down, in a big cavern of ice. And in his mouth is, you got it, Brutus, who betrayed his own benefactor, stabbed to the death the man who took him as his adopted son. What could be worse? And then, I mean, the facts aren't in question. He did stab him. And then we turn in English literature to another representation of the very same act. Well, there's the play by Shakespeare, in the final scene of which, over the corpse of Brutus, says Mark Antony, "Here lies the noblest Roman of them all." Well, it's kind of tough then. It's kind of difficult for me to tell you that we're going to find the truth. I'll start in this century, in the 20th century. Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of the Habsburg Empire, was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip in 28th of June, 1914. But let me draw some, from the details of that, some kind of things that we could look at. Did you know that he was sent, Gavrilo Princip, by one of the high members of the Serbian government to kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand? That the Prime Minister tried to stop, attempted to stop this from happening. He knew that a war would break out, and the Prime Minister of Serbia put a stop order on Gavrilo Princip and his two co-conspirators at the border, and they were evaded. They went around him. Then, when there was the plan came in action, they had 8 conspirators lined up along the route that they knew Franz Ferdinand was going to follow. And one of the first guys chickened out, the second guy didn't do it for some reason or other. The third guy threw a bomb, and it blew up some bystanders. The bystanders were brought to the hospital. Franz Ferdinand, completely untouched, a little shaken. I mean, you know, when you see a bomb go off. He went to the hospital to be, you know, say, gee, I'm so sorry that you got hurt because of me. And they decided to go back. I mean, after all, there was this attempt, and Gavrilo Princip was in a bar drinking. He had failed in his attempt. And the doggone cortege of the Franz Ferdinand came down the same path, because although the Austrians' head of security said, we're going to change the path now, we're going to change where we're going through the city, because after all an attempt had been made and he had gone to the hospital, now we'll go on a different route, and when we get to the city hall, we'll celebrate your visit. He went the same route, because they didn't tell the driver to change the route. So there Gavrilo Princip is, a little bit drunk, but he sees him coming. So he pulls out his pistol, bang, bang, and he kills him. Well, was that a conspiracy? Well, what happened was the Austrians said, we want him back. We want all the criminals of this thing to be given to us, and we want the right to go into Serbia with investigators and find all the people involved and arrest them and bring them back. No, said Serbia, you can't do that. We'll arrest them here, and we'll put them on trial, and it did no such thing. And you can't do that, that would offend our sovereignty. And the Russians backed them up. So when Russia backed up Serbia, World War I started. Was it a conspiracy then? What was the truth of this conspiracy? I can tell you how it happened, but you'll have to apply your own interpretation, and the interpretation is going to change. There's in Belgrade now, they have a monument to the Third Balkan War, which started in 1914 and lasted until 1918. The Third Balkan War. We don't call it that in this part of the world. In the 27th of February, 1933, not 1 month had gone by when our friends of the Nazi Party had started taking the rule of Germany. Not 1 month had gone by, and there was a fire in the Reichstag. This fire, they went in there and they grabbed a guy who was sitting there with fumes of gasoline all over him. The whole building was up in flames. Marinus van der Lubbe was his name. and he was a communist. So they put in a martial law throughout Germany immediately, right away. And they arrested a batch of communists and put them on trial, and they suppressed all the freedom of speech that had been up till then. They suppressed the freedom of the press, and they ruled with an iron hand from then on. Well, it's always been the assumption that it must have been a conspiracy. Those nasty Nazis, they must have had it in mind from the beginning that as soon as they got into power, they're going to burn down the Reichstag and frighten the poor German people into allowing them freedom, untrammeled power. And that has been the normal situation. We've said, yeah, that's probably the case. But when Mommsen in the 1970s looked into what the detailed response of the Germans after the fire, he found they were in a panic. They had really no idea this was going to happen. And their response was, well, okay, it's kind of interesting that the Reichstag's been burned, and they've got some drunken Dutchman. Let's make sure we say it's a communist plot. The drunken Dutchman had, in fact, been burning buildings for the last 7 years. But it took something like 50 years for all of those details to come out. At the time, the Nazis said it was a communist plot, the communists said it was a Nazi plot, and since the Nazis lost the war, it has been standard interpretation that it's a Nazi plot. Pearl Harbor, a day that will live in infamy. Well, the Japanese came over and bombed this American military base, and we haven't declared war or anything. Was it a Japanese plot? There's a guy named David Bergamini. He wrote a 2-volume, 1,200-page book saying it was, the entire thing was a conspiracy of one man, Hirohito. The one man who never had to face a court. Of all of Japan, he was let off by MacArthur. How come? How come MacArthur let him off? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Maybe it's because MacArthur liked being a good guy. You know, he comes in and all these Japanese are real afraid that their god king is going to be crushed by the Americans, and that kind of takes the last little bit of dignity away from the Japanese. And when he said, okay, you are now a constitutional monarch, Hirohito. You no longer have any power to run things. Why, MacArthur became immediately idolized. He became himself a kind of divine figure in Japanese society. And he liked that. Well, maybe that's why. I'm not sure. But there sure were a lot of people who said that FDR did it. There's one bit of evidence here, one bit of evidence there. Let's say he wasn't too sorry. That's probably true. There's lots of cross currents that happen in every historical event. It's very, very difficult to say, I know the truth. I'm going to establish what's going to happen. JFK got killed the 22nd of November in 1963. And that's very, very instructive for our purposes tonight. You know that LBJ, in Doris Kearns Goodwin's rendition, used to sit on the ranch and say he did it because he tried to kill Castro. That's not happened. And he, LBJ, had prevented a war from breaking out over the death of LBJ and us going to war with Cuba again, and maybe the Ruskies would come in and it would be just a mess. So he had kept the peace by assigning, you see, in those days there was at least some attempt to put in an independent investigation, put in the Supreme Court Justice or Warren, and we put in this independent investigation and tried to at least bring it across that it was something that wasn't ordered by the Cubans. The independent investigation was supposed to do it quickly and prevent any immediate outcry against the Cubans. So maybe, perhaps, there was a Cuban element, or maybe perhaps, if you look the other way around, maybe it was a bunch of disgruntled CIA people who are kind of angry that Kennedy hadn't gone into Cuba all the way. I can't say. It's difficult to say. We do have lots of interesting loose ends. We found out since. We know that that our hero Lee Harvey Oswald, had visited the Mexican consulate of the Cuban government in the weeks before the event. And we have difficult other problems that are very suggestive of the fact that perhaps the Cubans did get back at at Kennedy for trying to kill Castro. In the 9/11 investigation, we have a classic example of cover-up. It will historically be regarded as an example of how no longer did the American government have to spend any trouble to try to be independent. Philip Zelikow, who is the leader of the investigation for the United States government, worked with Condoleezza Rice in George H.W. Bush's National Security Council. He wrote a book with Condoleezza Rice. He was in charge of the transition team of the National Security Council. He was a member of George Bush's Presidential Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. And according to James Mann, writing in the book Rise of the Vulcans, Philip Zelikow wrote the 2002 memo which claims that the U.S. was authorized to engage in preemptive war as a result of 9/11. So we don't have an independent investigation at all. We have an effort to drag their feet on not cooperating with the investigation after it starts. We have a man placed in charge of the investigation, I'm sorry, who was obviously one of the actors in the question. So we haven't even started to investigate it in an honest way. And in the end, in the long run, more factual results will come out. However, we have to then look at the interpretation. In general, we in the United States are no longer a functioning democracy. The United States is an empire. The United States is engaged in endless wars. It is engaged in these endless wars because it is in the grip of corporate interests.
That's right.
I'm just going to tell you the truth. We're never going to get, quote, the truth. We have to be honest with one another. And do I win this election? Well, I don't know. I would be very surprised. There are 3,000 registered Greens in this district and 200,000 registered Democrats. I'm going to simply be honest with you. And I'll tell you that this election is about war. People who vote for peace in this election, if they vote for me, they are guaranteed not to have support, if I am elected, for more war. Why do we have more war? Well, we have to look at ourselves for that. We want low-priced, I'm going to just keep talking, but we want low-priced gasoline. That's part of the reason we are going to have an endless war. We want to have all of the consumer goods that our riches give us because these riches are sweated out of the brown and black people of the world. That's why we're going to have endless war. We cannot continue to be the top political and economic power of the world without an endless war. We are looking now at the last chapter of 1984, where the person who is interrogating and torturing the hero says, the future is a human boot stomping on a face forever. How do we stop that? We can only stop that with honesty. We have to look to ourselves. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Well, your theory, your supposition that we're never going to get to the truth is probably maybe true, but maybe nothing's going to be completely clear. Maybe most crimes aren't completely ever solved, like the absolute truth known about it. Does that mean we shouldn't pursue it?
Not at all. If you ask me,
what
what's
you're
my
saying.
opinion is that George Bush should be put on for war crimes. He is a war criminal.
Yeah, and 9/11 too.
Well, I haven't got the exact facts on 9/11. I do believe that planes hit a building and the building collapsed. I don't know why they haven't found any wreckage in the Pentagon, but it sure is suspicious that a building hit the Pentagon at all. It's the most highly guarded part of the military empire of the United States. This world-girdling empire, and a plane comes along and hits it. I don't know. I can't say except that whether George Bush should be impeached for that or not, I'm not going to go there for you. I'm going to say that the man is a war criminal because that is obviously is already established.
That's right, no doubt.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's great. I'll impeach him for for his various crimes. It's a crime family, goes all the way back to Prescott.
Oh no! It's not impeach. I'm going to put him on trial for being a war criminal.
There you go.
And that's what impeaching means we remove him from office. But after we remove him from office, the International Criminal Court in The Hague has a date with a number of people that ought to be doing hard time.
Right.
Absolutely, they are.
Or a very short time, either way you look at it.
But one of the things that I look at, like after an event, is like if we could start from say where we are and trace back. Like, look what's happening today with the civil liberties. Look what's happening to the Constitution, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Somalia, now we have ships down here.
The wars, if I can interrupt you, are so many that it's hard to even enumerate them all.
The coverts,
it's endless war.
It's endless war, and but we could trace a lot of what's going on today right back to the Project for the New American Century. Where it was, written, the whole takeover of especially the Middle East, as a result of some catastrophic event equivalent to a new Pearl Harbor. Like there's clues along the way that this was a big event. The Patriot Act, the Enabling Act.
We didn't get 700 odd military bases around the world in the last.
No, I got
years.
it. I got it. I know. I understand. I know we have big problems, and I do understand. I do. I'm just kind of like narrowing down. We at this particular point, we're bombing brown people all over the world, and we're torturing other ones, and we're at this particular point, we're bombing our own people now.
Mm-hmm.
The government has turned its foreign policy at this particular point has turned on its own people, and
in what sense was the government made up of all of those people in the United States? In what sense? The United States has always been a representative republic. And the
at one time we
representatives
were a
have always-
representative, and when we had the Constitution, we
That's
were a
right.
representative
Right.
republic.
It
We're
is-
not a representative republic
It
anymore.
is supposed to be the people who are selected to be empowered. It is not a democracy
Diebold
in the
does that
sense
now.
that the power is given to all people. We have a long history of restricting the suffrage, and when the suffrage is extended, then there are tools given to the wealthy people to counteract that extension of the suffrage. It is not the first time this has happened.
No.
Why, in Renaissance Italy, if I may, there were revolts all throughout the 13th century in which the popular party kept giving the aristocrats who were in control of various cities in Italy troubles. And as a result of that, there was a kind of a bait and switch put in, where various aristocrats would state that they were going to thing, and then they brought in a dictator, the Podestà it was called, who would then be above parties. These guys, the 3 or 4 parties who were really for the wealthiest families, they would contest control of the city or the commune. And the Podestà would come in for a year only, and then he'd have to leave, supposedly, at the end of the year. And it was a kind of disguising an aristocratic, disguising an oligarchic rule. And we are presently under a different sort of oligarchic rule in this country. And the reason we're sitting here asking a whole lot of questions, why would this happen, why would that happen, is because we're not being honest. We know, the Germans when they invaded Russia knew that they were the ones who started it. It wasn't really true that the Russians were about to invade Germany. It wasn't really true that there were any weapons of mass destruction. And we shouldn't sit around and ask questions. I mean, a normal, prudent adult, you know, when the little kid says that he's got to pee and he's got to get out of bed at 6 o'clock in the evening and not go to bed because he's got to pee, you give him the chance to go pee, and then I'm saying this as a father, you can tell where this one came from, and then when he gets back to bed, he says he's thirsty. Yeah. And you say, wait, I'm sorry, buddy, you just went to the bathroom. If you were thirsty, you would have had a drink. Now go to bed and sleep. Well, I'm sorry. When the little boy says, we got to invade Iraq because they have nuclear weapons, and there aren't any nuclear weapons, if we were adults, we'd have said, you're impeached.
That's right.
That's true.
And we didn't.
We did.
I'm sorry, then. It's our fault. We're the citizens of a world-girdling empire. We're slaves. Are we is this the home of the land of the, and what is it,
Whatever.
it's the last verse of the national anthem, and I'm forgetting it.
Home of the brave.
Home of the brave and the land of the free? Well, no. It's the home of the slaves and the land of the cowardly.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Right.
And we have candidates coming before us saying, I'm a coward. I can't possibly vote against the war because if I do, I won't get elected. I'm a coward. Vote for me.
That's right.
I know.
I'm
But
sorry.
I promise change.
They chumps change.
But I promise change.
Barry, you have the floor.
Yeah, the electoral really doesn't have any power. When you think about GATT, when you think about NIA, these are organizations, economic organizations,
Right.
can actually sue any nation in the world for not being able to support some economic investment. Now, with that having happened in this transnational economy, how do you expect that the Green Party or any party has any kind of power to do anything different than what's being done?
So, as I understand it, Barry, you are taking the fact that in a interconnected world, the fact that as you engage in closer commercial ties, some degree of sovereignty has to be sacrificed in order to engage in these closer commercial ties, and saying that there doesn't exist any national sovereignty whatsoever.
Yeah, because these organizations have gotten so powerful that they are actually telling governments what to do.
It is a contradiction, Barry, to say that you want to preserve national sovereignty when nationalism has led us to the centuries of war.
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
If we are all going to be citizens of the world,
I think 9/11.
we wouldn't be trying to preserve national sovereignty.
Endless war is the creation of this economic machine,
I
which is
disagree
controlled.
completely. If we had peaceful exchange and commerce, there wouldn't be endless war.
That's right.
I agree.
We're quite capable of developing, as the European Union has developed, sacrificing, giving up little by little amounts of national sovereignty and engaging in peaceful commerce with all the nations of the
What
world.
do you say that to the notion that the Bush administration has actually signed away the Constitution?
The Bush administration has from the beginning been tyrannical. The Constitution is a barrier to tyranny.
It is, but if it's already been signed off in secret, away from the American people, what can you do about it?
There's nothing secret about it.
Yeah.
It's evident to the most untutored eye that we are living in a tyranny. There's nothing secret about it.
The effects of it. I'm just saying the actual effect of 16 lanes being built from Mexico to Canada. The sign tells us there that it's already done, and yeah, we're feeling the effects of it, but officially it's already been done. What can you do about it? What can our electoral process do about this kind of thing?
A lot. Not one guy, though.
I'm disagreeing with your idea that we want always to have a strong, quote unquote, national power. I'm telling you that strong nationalism there was a time when there was not a strong nationalism prior to, let me just grab a normal flag identifier. There was less strong nationalism before the French Revolution.
2 minutes.
The French Revolution then instituted this era where you could cry nationalism, where the state, the nation state, was something that everyone owed allegiance to. I'm suggesting it has been, since the French Revolution, endless war leading to a world empire run by the so-called United States of America. The global war on terror would be a great idea. Let's arrest and prosecute the head terrorists in the White House.
Let's do it.
It's time.
Thank you very much.
We ask questions
Yeah.
of ourselves. Or...
Of one another.
Oh,
Of one another.
Oh, okay.
So you are gentlemen members of the Constitution.
That's correct.
And you believe that the Constitution is the form of government which we should have, which we should continue to have. Yes?
That's correct.
And the Constitution having been conceived in the late 18th century, one of the person who presided over its composition was its first president of the established institution which it governed, and told us not to get engaged in any foreign entanglements, and you would like to have that continue. But what about the fact that the Constitution also is an instrument which was written by people who had invested in federal bonds and who were capitalists of their era, every single one of them, and who wanted a strong government so that they could redeem their bonds that they had according to market law?
I would say that it's an imperfect document, but it's a pretty darn good starting point. I mean, there's enough in there to stop the war for the FISA, the thievery, the stealing. There's enough in there to stop the murders if we play it straight. Now, is it perfect? No, but there's a way to fix it. There's an amendment process. If we have a real flaw in that we identify, we can go fix that. But I would say there's enough in there right now to get started. We haven't tried it in so many decades to actually use the Constitution.
So first of all,
Do you agree with that?
I agree.
First of all, you've got a document written by slaveholders and capitalists, and it's imperfect. And then the document hasn't been followed for the last 50, 60 years. So we're going to elect a Constitution party? I'm not following. We have to do something quite different than go try to recover a long, obsolescent past.
Well, I think by not following the Constitution in the last decades, that's been one reason, not the only reason, for deterioration of our civil liberties, for instance, that are protected in the Constitution, and our wars that are fought. So I think returning to the Constitution, although it isn't perfect in the rule of law, would definitely help us go in the right direction. And
I would add that, though, if there isn't a rule book to follow, it's 50% plus one tyranny. Then if you can get enough votes, then you can impose your will on to me as you see fit. So therefore, your morality of the day, or whoever, not you, but the morality of the majority will be, and if that morality changes over time, I mean, we've had slaves in this country. We've had horrible things done in this country. I don't want to go back to a place where a small majority can tell me how to live. I believe I have individual liberty. That's probably the biggest thing I think is the Bill of Rights. It's an assumed inalienable right that's merely protected by that. There's nothing given to us in the Constitution. These rights are rights we were born with, and the ones we may like and not like. Free speech we love. The gun thing some guys don't like, but these are rights we've been given to is self-declared inalienable rights. And I think that's a key point that the morality could change.
And I agree, and I think just the Bill of Rights alone is worth keeping the Constitution, because it almost didn't get in, like you're saying. There's people who didn't want the Bill of Rights to get in, but fortunately, you know, it was pushed through, and it is to protect the people. So I would say even with the Bill of Rights alone, Amendments 1 through 10 are so important and so great, it's worth keeping just for that. I mean,
Have you studied the 27 duties of the federal government?
I've certainly read the Constitution.
27 duties, or 26, however you rate it.
My response is that you seek a refuge in some sort of dead legalism. There is no written part of the Constitution which says that women have the right to abortion. There is no right to privacy in the Constitution.
That's right.
Yet we do have that right, thanks to a developing consensus in the country.
There's a right called the Fourth Amendment. It's very clear. Unambiguous.
Yeah, okay.
Unambiguous.
You're able to see things that are unambiguous. I do not share. But I'll go on and say that there's also the fact that in the United States, when people come to the United States, we have a society that welcomes them. That in our society, when you come to the United States from Ouagadougou, and you show up on Main Street and get a house on Main Street, your neighbors are going to say, well, I guess you're an American. And if you go to, let's say, West Germany, actually it's no longer West Germany, it's all one country, Germany, and you come from Turkey, and you come to sit and pay your taxes, you're still Turkish. And your kids are born, and they grow up and go to school, and they're still Turkish. And their kids are born, their grandchildren even, and they're still Turkish. They're not Germans. We wouldn't even understand what the heck they're doing in there. Why are there riots in France about people who have been living there for generations? Because we've developed a morality in the United States that accepts foreigners, meaning they're us. They become Americans. That is what I would base my development of a better society. I would look toward the future. We do have some things that we have, the Constitution being one of them. And there are other things that we can improve. One of the things we don't have, one of the things we have had far too much respect for, is private property. And the Constitution was part of the problem in that regard. Just as when the abolitionists
we don't respect private property.
we have far too much respect for private property. We have far too much respect for wealthy people. We have far too much respect for the rich. And that was a similar problem in just that period of time that I talked about at the beginning of my speech, when nobody knew what to do about slavery. The Constitution protected slavery.
Actually, the truth is, we don't have any private property in this country. We have none. You stop paying, if you have paid off every fake dollar your bank loaned you, do you own your house? No. So we've taken the opportunity to steal from our neighbors to pay for schools, roads, etc. with our house. So there's no private property. You have your car. You own it. You don't pay the tax on the car. You don't drive it. Okay. I estimate to you we have zero respect for private property at all. And so I think we need to get back to the absolute right to my private property.
Mr. Brownlow, that's exactly the difference between you and me. You consider we don't have enough respect for private property, and I consider we have far too much.
But there is none. So how can it be less than none?
There is a possibility that we're not unable to find a common ground, Mr. Brownlow.
Okay.
That's a possibility.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Are we done?
Yeah, unless you want to go more. It was fun.